Are in a silent depression. When you compare the Great Depression to today, this is going to absolutely blow your mind. In 1930, during the Great Depression, the average home in America was $3,900. The average car was $600, and the average monthly rent was $18 or $216 a year, and the average salary was $1,300 for the year. Fast forward to today, it is $436,000 for the average home, $48,000 for the average car, and the average rent is $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year, and we have a $56,000 income for the average American right now. So if you look back to the Great Depression, the house was only 3 times the average salary. Now it is 8 times the average salary. The car was 46% of the salary. The car today is 85% of the salary. And here's the craziest part. The rent was 16% of the average salary. It is now 42% of the average salary.
Canada's tax system is a criminal enterprise, sucking dry the $55,000 annual income of the average Joe. Trudeau and the Talking Timbit pocket a combined $11,419 in income tax, while $3,957 disappears into employment insurance and the Canadian pension plan. Considering 32% of fuel costs in Ontario are taxes, a further $1,000 is seized from Joe and an additional $6,000 in property taxes. In total, Joe relinquishes $22,376 annually to the government. The remaining $32,624 is subject to a 13% sales tax every time he spends a dime, dwindling Joe's purchasing power to $28,380, or half of his annual salary. Essentially, Joe works 6 months out of the year as a slave to the state. And what does Joe get in return for this modern-day serfdom? A government that imprisoned him in his own home for years, coerced him into taking potentially harmful experimental pharmaceutical products, a healthcare system that ranks second to last among its peers, an economy spiraling towards disaster, as well as out-of-control crime rates and mass homelessness plaguing our streets. All of this courtesy of a cabal of traitorous bureaucrats who dream of eradicating private car ownership by 2030 and are actively pushing legislation that would throw Canadians in jail for daring to utter anything deemed hateful by their Orwellian standards. Tyranny isn't a distant threat, it's already entrenched in Canada's governance, eroding the freedoms fought for by generations past.
Yes. Allow me to explain how our private banks and government work today. First, the Canadian government borrows money from the private banks. They then lend the debt-based money to Canada with compounded interest. The government then continues to increase taxation of Canadians year after year in order to pay back the interest on the exponentially growing national debt. What results is inflation, less real money for Canadians to spend into our economy, and the real money being used to pad the pockets of the banks. Also, the government gave the banks the ability to loan out money that doesn't exist in the form of loans. When a bank gives you a mortgage, which literally means a death pledge, or a loan, they don't actually give you money. They click a key on a computer and generate the fake money out of thin air. They don't actually have it in their bank vaults. Presently, the banks only have $4 billion on reserve, but they have loaned out over $1.5 trillion. To quote Graham Towers, each and every time a bank makes a loan, a new bank credit is created. New deposits, brand new money. Broadly speaking, all new money comes out of a bank in the form of loans. As loans are debt, then under the present system, all money is debt. What I find interesting is even Jesus in Matthew 21 drove out the money changers in the temple because they were manipulating the currency to steal money from the people. The private banks are just like the money changers in Matthew 21. They are defrauding and robbing the people of Canada, thus their freedom, and they need to be stopped. How should the banking system work? In an infamous interview, Mr. McGeer asked Mr. Towers, "Can you tell me why a government with power to create money should give that power away to a private monopoly and then borrow that which Parliament can create itself back at interest to the point of national bankruptcy?" Mr. Towers replied, "If Parliament wants to change the form of operating the banking system, then certainly that is within the powers of Parliament." In other words, If the Canadian government needs money, they can borrow it directly from the Bank of Canada. The people would then pay fair taxes to repay the Bank of Canada. This tax money would in turn get injected back into our economic infrastructure and the debt would be wiped out. Canadians would again prosper with real money as the foundation of our economic structure and not debt money. Regarding the debt money owed to the private banks, such as the Royal Bank, we would simply have the Bank of Canada print the money owing, hand it over to the private banks, and then clear the debt with the Bank of Canada. And yes, we have the power and lawful right to do so. In conclusion, it has become painfully obvious, even for me, a 12-year-old Canadian, that we are being defrauded and robbed by the banking system and a complicit government. What will we do to stop this crime? What will we do to ensure that the next generation will live free and clear of the debt-based economy that enslaves them to the banks? Margaret Mead said the following, and I hope that all of you remember this. Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
It is my opinion that you do not really understand the concept of banking. All the banks are broke. Bank Santander, Deutsche Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, they're all broke. And why are they broke? It isn't an act of God. It isn't some sort of tsunami. They're broke because we have a system called fractional reserve banking, which means that banks can lend money that they don't actually have. It's a criminal scandal and it's been going on for too long. To add to that problem, you have moral hazard, a very significant moral hazard from the political sphere. And most of the problem starts in politics and central banks, which are part of the same political system. We have counterfeiting, sometimes called quantitative easing, but counterfeiting by any other name. The artificial printing of money, which if any ordinary person did, they'd go to prison for a very long time. And yet governments and central banks do it all the time. Central banks repress the amount of interest that rates are, so we don't have the real cost of money. And yet we blame the real retail banks for manipulating LIBOR. The sheer effrontery of this is quite astonishing. It's central banks that manipulate interest rates, Commissioner. And plus, underneath all this, we talk loosely, in a rather cavalier fashion, do we not, about deposit guarantees. So when banks go broke through their own incompetence and chicanery, the taxpayer picks up the tab. It's theft from the taxpayer. And until we start sending bankers, and I include central bankers and politicians, to prison for this outrage, it will continue.
So I put 10,000 into the bank, they take my 10,000 and they go get 100,000. They borrow it from the Fed window. They get 10 times the amount of our deposits that we put into the bank. They then get 10 times the amount. They then take that 10 times the amount and they put it into treasury bonds or something else that's going to give them a yield of 7% or 6%. While they pay us what? 0.0000 nothing percent. Right. And then what happens? We get hip to it and say, hey, Mr. Silicon Valley Bank, can I have my money back? Oh, we don't have it right now. I want my money back. I don't have it. Everybody, I want my money back. Give us our money back. Hold on, we got to go sell the treasury bonds that we invested in that now are upside down because the rates are through the roof. And I don't have your money. So what has to happen to their Ponzi scheme? That I would have went to jail if I did that? They get bailed out. Mr. Biden comes up and says, oh, I'm going to print more money. I wonder why he's going to print more money. To devalue your dollar even more. Because guess what they're doing next to you? They're going to centralize banking. They're going to own crypto. They're going to regulate everything to be digital. So this is the first step to doing it. And they're going to own us. We got to wake up because that's what's happening. And next, there's a war going to go on between China or between Russia, and we're right in the middle, right? And then you look at these companies like BlackRock. Does anybody ever hear of BlackRock? Or Vanguard? Oh, how coincidental. Since 9/11, you own everything. You own everything. You own Pfizer. You own Moderna. Just coincidentally, but we don't know who the hell you are. You're never on TV. But you own Apple. You own Facebook. So you own everybody's identities, all everybody's information. You own Smith & Wesson. You own manufacturers of guns. We're going to war. It just seems you're everywhere at the right time to make all the money. And you're the biggest company in the world, but you're never on the news. We never hear about you. Yeah, man, we got serious problems.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year. And what we're doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted, okay?
We're doing the same thing.
And so it's just, you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities. We're going to have to force change.